What's going on, guys and gals? It is Wednesday, December the 30th, and this is my news radar. As we push towards a world where we extend the screens of our smartphones out as far as humanly possible, even going as far as to wrap the screens around the edges of our phones with curved screens, or something like the Mi Mix Alpha, let's just wrap it all the way around to the back of the phone and do some weird, crazy stuff there. We've had to come up with more and more creative methods to retain the front-facing camera on our smartphones while still trying to give our phones more and more screen real estate, smaller and smaller bezels to have to stare at. Now, on some phones like the Surface Duo, they didn't really give too much attention to bezel size there. They just kind of said, who cares? And I think in that instance, it makes some sense because you actually need something to hold on to while you rotate the screen back around, so forth and so on. But in a standard candy bar style phone, there's really no disadvantage to shrinking those bezels more and more. We've seen phone manufacturers do things like have cameras in motorized pop-ups, which I actually quite like. My OnePlus 7 Pro is still going strong. There were a lot of people early days that said, oh, you motorize the camera, it's going to fail in 6 months or a year and you're going to need it. Well, that has not really come to fruition. Those designs have worked just fine for months and years on. They're still working just fine. My wife's Xiaomi Mi 9T Pro, that pop-up camera, was working just fine when we took her SIM out and put it into the new Pixel 5. But all these things are trying to accomplish the same task, and that is to have an uninterrupted, bezel-less, notchless screen. And we've done things like hole punches and things like this as well, but that's just sort of a stopgap. Well, it appears that Samsung has maybe a very strange spin on the under-display camera that we've seen on something like this new ZTE phone that just came out a couple of weeks ago. So the new technology is you're going to put the camera actually underneath the screen and then look through that screen at the outside world. And look, it's going to be a bit fuzzy because you're trying to focus. Literally, you're looking through a screen, so it just isn't going to work that well. Now, it will improve. It will get better. That is probably where we're going. Look at the way that in-display fingerprint readers. Look at where they've gotten in a short amount of time. Dealing with similar sorts of issues. Well, they've gotten quite good quite quickly. Well, like I said, Samsung has a very, very strange idea and a very, very strange design. And this is coming from letsgodigital.org, and they are working off of a patent that they pulled from Samsung. And basically what they're doing here is they've got a sub-display underneath the main display that is motorized to move up and to cover that hole, or to move down and reveal the hole punch camera like in their current devices. This is a very strange design. And in this patent here, you can see exactly what I mean. You activate the camera and a little bitty screen, a little bitty portion of screen on some sort of moving mechanism will slide up or slide down. Slide up to cover that hole punch, slide down to uncover said hole punch, so that you can have sort of the best of both worlds. Now, this is very, very interesting. I have to wonder, will this increase the thickness of the phone? What phone will this potentially make it into? But there are advantages here. So you're not going to have to deal with that problem of looking through the display to be able to see, the outside world with your camera. You're going to be just looking through an empty space, a hole. I think this is a genuinely really interesting and innovative way to try and tackle this problem of hole punches, notches, and so forth. What do you think of this design? Let me know in the comments down below if you're interested to see how this would work in action in the real world, if you think it would be worth potential sacrifices being made to thickness to have no hole punch. I'd love to know some feedback about that down in the comments. So let's talk about one of the first phones to be running the Snapdragon 888 that you're going to be able to buy, and that is the Xiaomi Mi 11. This thing actually looks really, really impressive. You're looking at, like I said, Snapdragon 888, a 2K AMOLED 120 Hz display, 108 megapixel camera, And there you've got the appearance there. And I actually think that the thing looks pretty solid. I actually kind of like the look. The camera bump is really big, but they're doing it in kind of a stylized sort of way, and I kind of like it. So if we go over more of the specs, there's 6.81 inch QHD AMOLED. This is a big phone, a big screen, 515 ppi. The screen's going to look really good with that 120 hertz refresh rate, which is super smooth. It's going to look really good. Claimed up to 1500 nits of brightness, HDR10 plus. I mean, you're ticking every box you could possibly tick as far as this thing goes. Hole punch cutout for the front. You don't have that magical motorized SubDisplay from Samsung just yet, but you know, whatever. We're going to deal with that for a while longer, I guess. Up to 12 gigs of RAM, 256 UFS 3.1, super duper fast storage. And a touch response rate that I missed there, 480 hertz. This thing's going to be so responsive, quick, with that new processor, fast screen, fast refresh rate, fast touch polling rate. A lot of really good stuff to like here. Looking at the camera setup here with, you know, get a view of some of these extra colors. I kind of like the purple. Purple's pretty good there. We do have that 108 megapixel camera up front that we've been seeing, you know, on a lot of different devices. I say up front as in first in line, not on the front of the device, obviously. f1.85 aperture, fine, should be just fine. OIS, a 13 megapixel wide angle lens, f2.4. 123 degree field of view, should be just fine. A 5 megapixel macro sensor is basically just a throwaway to me. I don't care about a macro lens. They don't look good. They don't perform well. I don't care, but whatever. It's a macro lens. 4600 milliamp hour battery, 55 watt fast charging. That is really fast. And 50 watt wireless fast charging. Are you kidding me? 50 watt wireless is something that would be dreamt of a few months ago, and now it's a thing. 10 watt reverse charging, and an IR blaster. Who else misses the IR blaster feature from some of these old LG phones and things like that? I really miss that. That's pretty cool. Cool to keep that in there by Xiaomi. And then here's the really cool thing about it. $612 is what it exchanges to in US. This thing is not even expensive. This thing is actually fairly cheap, and the tricks don't end there. The fingerprint scanner is actually going to double as a heart rate monitor. So you get a look at the front here, there's your hole punch, but like I said, it is an in-display fingerprint reader that will also double as a heart rate monitor. And I believe this is the first time we've seen anything quite like that in a phone. As far as I've seen, it appears that that's what they're claiming as well. I've never heard of such a thing, UnderDisplay. Ice Universe on Twitter, a big leaker, he basically doubles down on what I'm saying. This thing, the screen is pretty much off the charts, ridiculous, best I've seen potentially. Ever. The thing looks incredibly impressive. And hey, it's variable refresh rate. So you can do 30, 60, 90, or 120. If you want to maybe save some battery life, drop down to 90, you can do so. Personally, how on earth this phone is going to be, you know, $600 some odd, I have no idea how Xiaomi continues to do this. I actually do rather like MIUI as well. I mean, like we've used on a Xiaomi device here in my home. MIUI is actually pretty good. Like this is a really tantalizing device for somebody that is looking for a new phone. I didn't actually mention that the camera there in the front is a 20 megapixel selfie shooter, 8K recording on the back. This thing honestly does tick every freaking box there is to be ticked at a really low price. And let's wrap things up with something I've seen in a trend a couple of times now as different publications wrap up their 2020 coverage. There's one thing that I keep seeing, and you know, look, they make lists. Here are the best phones, the worst phones, the biggest fails, so forth and so on. And there's one pattern I keep seeing. It's the Surface Duo making the naughty list from a lot of publications, and we do have another one from Android Authority. There's 3 whole paragraphs here, and I guess one of these paragraphs is actually just one sentence, so not really a paragraph. But let's look at what they had to say over on Android Authorities. Microsoft Surface Duo says, quote, Microsoft made waves in 2019 when it revealed the Surface Duo for the first time, making its major entry into the Android space. Marking its first major entry into the Android space. I should correct myself. It was a rather intriguing concept, too. Microsoft showed off a dual-screen foldable and promised to reinvent how you interacted with apps. Well, let's look at this for a moment. Let's just kind of stop there. Did the Surface Duo change the way that that some people, I'm just going to speak about myself, the way I interact with apps. Yes, absolutely. And before I go any further, here, this is highly subjective. These lists are highly subjective. This is my opinion. This is the author of this article's opinion, who is Hadley Simmons. This is Hadley Simmons' opinion. He's entitled to his opinion. I happen to, disagree on some points. So did Surface Duo change the way I interact with apps? Yes, it did. In a very real sense. Unfortunately, he goes on, reviews show that Surface Duo was an unpolished mess at launch. Microsoft software contained loads of bugs, while the list of apps that supported the dual screen design was disappointingly short. So, was the Surface Duo an unpolished mess at launch? Unfortunately, I'm going to agree with Mr. Simmons on that point. It was an unpolished mess, and it remains a little bit too unpolished for me to recommend to most people. It still has its more than its fair share of bugs, glitchiness, so forth and so on. Now, as for the part about, the list of apps that support a dual screen design being disappointingly short, that's also true. Like, if you were looking to have, all the major apps supporting spanning, because that's what he appears to be talking about, you're not going to get that, and you never really were. The good news is that the Surface Duo is about doing two things at once, not doing two things spanned across two screens. So I don't really care that there aren't that many apps. I made a video the other day about how TikTok is now supporting spanning, and it's kind of tongue-in-cheek because I don't care. I don't use that feature. I don't think anyone's going to use that feature because it defeats the purpose. The point of the Surface Duo is not to just have, like I said, one app spanning two screens. You can have TikTok span across both screens, and that works just fine, but that defeats the purpose of Surface Duo, where you can have TikTok up while you're scrolling through Twitter or what have you. But that's, look, your mileage will vary in regards to that. If you were hoping to have a two-screen device to do one thing at a time, span across two screens, then you'll be disappointed by that. I don't think that is many people, though. Last paragraph here, a lack of polish wasn't the only strike against Microsoft's phone. However, it was overpriced. For $1,400, you got 2019's flagship silicon, no 5G, no NFC, no fast charging, which is not true because it is 18-watt fast charging, and no wireless charging. You're better off spending a little extra for the Z Fold 2 unless you really want that book-like Kindle experience. So there's a couple of things there as well. We've talked about, the specs and so forth. Look, it's $1,400, but again, find me a device that is this thin. Find me a device that, does what this thing does, has the two screens, has the hinge. This thing is not cheap to make. It's not made of cheap materials. Of course, it's expensive. It was always going to be expensive, and it's not intended to be purchased by a million people, which also is going to drive up the price. I've talked about this in the past. It's too thin for NFC. Personally, look, if 5G was in there, that's fine, whatever. I don't care. I don't use 5G. And in fact, nobody uses 5G. Wireless charging would have been cool, but also the thickness would have had to have been increased to get that going as well. I still fail to get the comparison between this and the Z Fold line, because the Z Fold just is a big screen. This is two screens. I think people are continuing to just not understand what this thing is about. I will fully grant that it has a lot of bugs and that this thing launched in a state that I wished it didn't launch in, that I wish it launched in a better place. So, look, if you want to call it, on your list of smartphone fails of 2020. In fact, they didn't just list it on that list. It was actually the headlining phone for their list. So, feel free to do so. That is your prerogative. I do still enjoy the Surface Duo, and there's a lot of people that do. I'd love to know what you guys think about the coverage it's received in the comments down below. Do you think that these critiques are relevant? Do you think that they're meaningful? Do you feel like people are just repeating the same critiques over and over, and maybe they haven't checked in post-launch to see where things are? I wonder if maybe that might be happening. I noticed that in my comments, I see the same 2 or 3 sentences over and over, even though I've answered the critiques multiple times. So I just wonder kind of what you guys have experienced, what your thoughts are on that type of thing. So guys, that's all the news I have for you today. Please let me know in the comments below what you think about the slight alteration to the format for the News Radar. I'd love to know what you guys think about that. Do stay tuned for a next edition of News Radar every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And in the meantime, please do stay nerdy, my friends.